They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it's also served with a legal contract, a recording device, and the patience of a spider waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My name is Alexandra Sterling, and this is the story of how I turned my biggest professional betrayal into the sweetest victory of my career. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember it perfectly because it was the day I realized that 7 years of loyalty, overtime, and genuine belief in corporate meritocracy had been nothing more than an elaborate joke at my expense. I had been working at Meridian Financial Solutions for nearly a decade, climbing from junior analyst to senior project manager through sheer determination and countless 18-hour days. The company specialized in fintech solutions for small businesses, and I had poured my heart into developing what I believed would be our next breakthrough product. My project, which I had privately nicknamed Business Bridge, was a revolutionary platform that would allow small businesses to integrate their accounting, inventory management, and customer relationship systems into one seamless interface. More importantly, it included an AI-driven predictive analytics component that could forecast cash flow problems weeks in advance, potentially saving thousands of small businesses from bankruptcy. I had spent 8 months developing the concept, working nights and weekends to perfect the algorithms, conducting market research on my own time, and even funding initial prototype development with my personal savings. The project represented everything I had learned about business software in my career, combined with insights I had gained from my MBA thesis on predictive financial modeling. The morning of that fateful Tuesday, I walked into the conference room with my presentation materials, my heart pounding with excitement and nervous energy. This was my moment. I had finally managed to secure a meeting with Marcus Blackwood, our CEO, along with the entire executive committee. After months of being told my project needed more development by my direct supervisor, David Harrison, I had gone over his head and requested the meeting myself. Marcus Blackwood was the kind of CEO who inspired both fear and admiration. He had built Meridian from a small startup into a $100 million company in just 15 years. He was known for his sharp business acumen, his ability to spot profitable opportunities, and unfortunately, his complete lack of patience for what he considered wasted time. I began my presentation with confidence, walking through the market opportunity, the technical specifications, and the projected revenue streams. The room was attentive, and I could see genuine interest in their eyes as I explained how Business Bridge could capture a significant portion of the small business software market, which was projected to reach $12 billion within 5 years. The initial investment would be approximately $2.5 million. I explained, clicking to my financial projections slide. But based on conservative estimates, we could see profitability within 18 months, with projected revenues of $50 million in the first 3 years. Marcus leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes focused intently on my presentation. This is impressive work, Alexandra. How long have you been developing this? 8 months of intensive development, sir, though the core concept has been evolving in my mind for nearly 2 years. David Harrison, my supervisor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Throughout my presentation, he had been unusually quiet, which I found strange given that he had been so vocal about the project's supposed shortcomings in our private meetings. The market research is thorough, commented Jennifer Walsh, our chief marketing officer, and the competitive analysis shows a clear gap in the market that we could exploit. What about the technical feasibility? Asked Robert Chen, our chief technology officer. I spent the next 20 minutes diving deep into the technical architecture, explaining the machine learning models, the data integration protocols, and the security frameworks I had designed. By the end of my presentation, the room was buzzing with excitement. Marcus stood up and extended his hand. Congratulations, Alexandra. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking that will keep Meridian ahead of the competition. I want you to prepare a detailed implementation plan. We'll fast-track this project. I felt like I was floating as I gathered my materials. 7 years of hard work had finally paid off. I was going to lead the development of a product that could transform our company and help thousands of small businesses succeed. David Harrison approached me as I was leaving the conference room. "Good work, Alexandra," he said, but something in his tone made me uneasy. "Let's schedule a follow-up meeting tomorrow to discuss the next steps." That night, I celebrated with my roommate Jennifer over a bottle of wine, talking excitedly about the project and what it could mean for my career. I had visions of leading a dedicated team, maybe even getting promoted to director level, and finally being recognized for the contributions I'd been making to the company. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, eager to begin work on the implementation plan. David had scheduled our meeting for 10 a.m., and I spent the morning refining my project timeline and preparing detailed technical specifications. But when 10 o'clock arrived, David's assistant informed me that he had been called into an emergency meeting with Marcus and would need to reschedule. This happened again the next day. And the day after that. By Friday, I was starting to feel anxious about the delays. The following Monday, I received an email that would haunt me for months. It was a company-wide announcement about an exciting new product launch. The subject line read, "Meridian announces revolutionary new platform, Small Biz Suite." My hands trembled as I opened the email and read the details. Small Biz Suite was described as an innovative platform that would allow small businesses to integrate their accounting, inventory management, and customer relationship systems into one seamless interface. It included an AI-driven predictive analytics component that could forecast cash flow problems weeks in advance. It was my project. Every single detail, every algorithm, every market insight I had presented just 1 week earlier. The only difference was the name and the fact that David Harrison was listed as the project lead and primary developer. I immediately called David's office, but his assistant said he was unavailable. I tried reaching Marcus, but was told he was in back-to-back meetings. Desperate for answers, I made my way to David's office and waited outside until he returned from lunch. "David, we need to talk," I said, following him into his office. He looked uncomfortable but gestured for me to sit down. "What can I do for you, Alexandra? What can you do for me?" I struggled to keep my voice level. "You can explain why my project is being announced as your project." David leaned back in his chair, and for a moment, I saw something I had never seen before in his expression, a cold calculation that made my stomach turn. "Alexandra, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Small Biz Suite is a project I've been developing for several months. Your presentation last week had some interesting ideas, and I appreciate your input, but this is fundamentally my project." I stared at him in disbelief. "David, you know that's not true. I have documentation, emails, development notes going back 8 months. I have the original code, the market research, everything." "I'm sure you have some notes from our brainstorming sessions," he said with a patronizing smile. "But the core concept, the technical architecture, the business model, that's all my work. I've been developing this since last summer." "Since last summer?" I felt my face flush with anger. "David, I can prove that every single component of this project originated from my work. I have time-stamped files, emails with external consultants, even receipts for the market research I funded myself." His expression hardened. "Alexandra, I need you to be very careful about what you're accusing me of. Making false claims about intellectual property could be grounds for termination." The threat hung in the air between us. I realized with a sinking feeling that David had planned this carefully. He had access to all my files as my supervisor. He had attended every meeting where I had discussed the project's development. He had been in the perfect position to steal my work and present it as his own. "I want to speak with Marcus," I said. "Marcus is extremely busy with the Small Biz Suite launch. He's asked me to handle all project-related communications." David's smile was predatory now. "I think it would be best if you focused on your current assignments and left the strategic projects to senior management." I left his office feeling numb. In the span of one conversation, I had watched 7 years of trust and loyalty crumble into dust. But more than that, I had witnessed the theft of something I had created, something that represented hundreds of hours of my life and thousands of dollars of my own money. Over the next few weeks, I tried every avenue I could think of to reclaim my project. I documented everything, created detailed timelines proving my ownership of the ideas, and even consulted with an intellectual property attorney. But the lawyer's assessment was grim. Without clear written agreements about intellectual property ownership, and given that I had developed the project while employed by Meridian, proving theft would be extremely difficult and expensive. Meanwhile, Small Biz Suite was moving forward at breakneck speed. David had assembled a team of 12 developers and was given a budget of $4 million, significantly more than the $2.5 million I had requested. The irony was bitter. My project was being executed with more resources than I had ever dreamed of, but I was completely excluded from its development. I watched from the sidelines as David gave interviews to trade publications, presenting himself as a visionary leader in fintech innovation. He spoke eloquently about the market opportunity, using phrases and insights I had developed in my original research. He even used some of my exact language when describing the technical challenges and solutions. The worst part was the recognition he received. Marcus publicly praised David's innovative thinking and strategic vision. The board of directors commended his leadership. He was featured on the cover of Financial Technology Weekly as one of the rising stars of fintech innovation. 3 months after the project launch, I received the most devastating news yet. Small Biz Suite had exceeded all projections, generating over $5 million in revenue in its first quarter alone. The product was being hailed as a game changer in the industry, and Meridian's stock price had jumped by 30%. David Harrison was promoted to Vice President of Product Development, received a $100,000 bonus, and was given stock options worth potentially millions of dollars. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in my same cubicle, working on routine maintenance projects, watching my stolen creation make someone else rich and famous. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the trade publication that featured David on the cover. The headline read, "The Visionary Behind Small Biz Suite, How David Harrison Revolutionized Small Business Software." Inside, the article detailed his innovative approach to product development, his deep understanding of market needs, and his unique technical insights. Every word felt like a knife in my chest. This was my life's work being celebrated, my ideas being praised, my potential being realized by someone else. I had never felt so powerless, so invisible, so thoroughly defeated. But as I sat there in the darkness of my living room, something began to shift inside me. The despair and self-pity slowly gave way to something else, a cold, calculating anger that felt surprisingly familiar. It reminded me of how I felt when I was developing complex algorithms, the methodical determination that drove me to solve problems that others considered impossible. I began to think about David's weaknesses, about the flaws in his character that had made this theft possible. He was arrogant, lazy, and fundamentally uncreative. He had built his career on taking credit for other people's work, but he lacked the deep understanding necessary to truly innovate. Most importantly, he had underestimated me. Over the next few days, I began to formulate a plan. It would require patience, careful planning, and a willingness to play a long game. But I had one crucial advantage that David didn't know about. I understood my own creation better than anyone else in the world. Small Biz Suite was based on algorithms I had developed, using architecture I had designed, solving problems I had identified. While David could present and manage the project, he didn't truly understand its technical foundations. And that gap in understanding would become his downfall. I started by doing something that felt counterintuitive. I stopped trying to prove that the project was originally mine. Instead, I focused on becoming the most knowledgeable person in the company about Small Biz Suite's technical architecture and market applications. I studied every update, every client implementation, every technical challenge the development team encountered. I volunteered to help with client support issues, positioning myself as someone who was eager to contribute to the project's success despite not being part of the core team. David, basking in his newfound success, was happy to have extra help dealing with the growing number of technical support requests. Within 6 months, I had become the unofficial expert on Small Biz Suite troubleshooting. Clients specifically requested me when they encountered complex technical issues. The development team consulted me when they couldn't understand why certain algorithms behaved unexpectedly. Even David started coming to me with questions, though he was careful to frame them as collaborative discussions, rather than admitting he needed my help. During this time, I was also carefully documenting everything. I recorded every conversation where David demonstrated his lack of understanding about the product's technical foundations. I saved every email where he made incorrect assumptions about the algorithms. I collected evidence of every instance where he took credit for solutions that actually came from other team members. But most importantly, I was preparing for the next phase of my plan. I had started developing what I privately called Small Biz Suite 2.0, a significantly enhanced version of the platform that addressed the limitations and bugs that had become apparent during the first year of deployment. This new version wasn't just an incremental improvement, it was a complete reimagining of the platform that solved fundamental architectural problems in the original design. I had learned from watching how clients actually used the software, identifying pain points and inefficiencies that hadn't been apparent during the initial development phase. I worked on this project entirely on my own time, using my personal equipment, and carefully documenting every aspect of its development to ensure there could be no question about its ownership. I even consulted with my intellectual property attorney to make sure I was protecting my work properly this time. The breakthrough came during a client crisis in the summer of 2024. Megacorp Industries, one of Meridian's largest clients, was experiencing severe system failures that threatened to disrupt their entire business operation. The Small Biz Suite implementation was crashing during peak usage periods, causing data corruption and financial reporting errors. David assembled an emergency task force to address the crisis, but after 2 weeks of round-the-clock work, the team was no closer to a solution. The technical challenges were beyond their expertise, and David was growing increasingly desperate as Megacorp threatened to terminate their contract and demand damages. That's when I made my move. I requested a private meeting with Marcus, bypassing David entirely. When Marcus's assistant initially tried to defer the meeting, I told her to inform Marcus that I had a solution to the Megacorp crisis that could save the company millions of dollars in potential damages and lost revenue. Marcus agreed to see me that afternoon. I walked into his office carrying a tablet and a folder full of technical documentation. He looked stressed and exhausted. The Megacorp situation was threatening to become a public relations disaster that could damage Meridian's reputation permanently. "Alexandra, I hope you have good news for me," he said without preamble. "I do, sir. I've identified the root cause of the Megacorp system failures, and I have a solution that can be implemented within 72 hours. His eyes lit up with hope. "Tell me." I explained the technical issue in detail, walking him through the architectural flaw that was causing the system crashes. It was a problem related to the database optimization algorithms, specifically a weakness in the original design that I had identified months earlier but hadn't had the opportunity to address. The solution requires a complete rewrite of the data processing engine. I continued. But I've already developed the new architecture. With the right team, we can have it deployed and tested within 3 days. Marcus leaned forward, studying the technical specifications I had provided. "This is impressive work. Alexandra, how long have you been working on this solution?" "I've been tracking this issue since the original deployment, sir. I suspected it might become a problem as usage scaled up, so I developed a contingency plan." "And David's team hasn't been able to identify this issue?" I chose my words carefully. "The root cause is quite subtle, sir. It requires a deep understanding of the original architectural decisions and their long-term implications." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and I could see him processing the implications of what I was telling him. Here was a critical technical crisis that his promoted VP couldn't solve, but a senior project manager had not only identified the problem but developed a comprehensive solution. "What do you need to implement this fix?" he asked. "Direct access to the Megacorp implementation, a team of 3 senior developers, and authorization to make the necessary changes to the core system architecture." "Done. I'm putting you in charge of resolving this crisis. Report directly to me and keep me updated every 12 hours. "What about David?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "David will be informed that you're leading the technical response. His job right now is to manage client communications and damage control. I spent the next 72 hours implementing the most elegant solution of my career. Working with a hand-picked team of developers, I deployed the new data processing engine, restructured the database optimization protocols, and implemented several additional improvements that enhanced the system's overall performance. The fix didn't just resolve the crisis, it made Small Biz Suite significantly more robust and efficient than it had ever been. Megacorp's system performance improved by 40%, and several bugs that had been plaguing other clients were eliminated as well. Marcus was impressed enough to call an emergency board meeting to discuss the crisis resolution. In that meeting, I presented a detailed post-mortem analysis that included not only the technical solution, but also recommendations for preventing similar issues in the future. The fundamental issue, I explained to the board, was a lack of long-term architectural planning in the original design. The algorithms were optimized for the initial deployment scenario, but they didn't scale effectively as usage patterns evolved. One of the board members asked, "Could this problem have been prevented during the original development phase?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. With proper architectural review and stress testing, yes, the issue would have been identifiable during the design phase with the right expertise. After the meeting, Marcus asked me to stay behind. When the room had cleared, he turned to me with a serious expression. "Alexandra, I need to ask you something directly. Did you identify these architectural issues during the original Small Biz Suite development?" This was the moment I had been preparing for. I pulled out a folder containing time-stamped documentation, email threads, and technical notes dating back to the original project development. "Yes, sir. I raised several concerns about scalability and long-term performance during the initial design phase. I have documentation of these discussions." I showed him emails I'd sent to David during the development process, highlighting potential architectural weaknesses and suggesting alternative approaches. I had copies of technical reviews where I had questioned certain design decisions. Most damning of all, I had a recorded conversation where David had dismissed my concerns as overthinking and told me to focus on getting the basic functionality working. Marcus studied the documentation for several minutes, his expression growing increasingly grim. Why didn't these concerns reach me during the original development? I raised them with David, sir. He indicated that they were being addressed at the architecture level, but apparently, they weren't incorporated into the final design. Marcus was quiet for a long time, and I could see him connecting the dots. A pattern was emerging that painted David's leadership in a very different light than the glowing success story that had been presented to the board. "I want you to prepare a comprehensive technical audit of Small Biz Suite," he said finally. "I want to understand all the architectural decisions, identify any other potential issues, and develop a roadmap for long-term optimization." "I'd be happy to do that, sir. And Alexandra, I want this audit to include an assessment of the original development process. I want to understand how these issues were missed and what we can do to prevent similar problems in the future." Over the next month, I conducted the most thorough technical audit of my career. I analyzed every component of Small Biz Suite, documented every architectural flaw, and traced the origins of every design decision. The picture that emerged was devastating for David's reputation. The audit revealed that Small Biz Suite had been built on fundamentally flawed architecture that prioritized quick deployment over long-term stability. Multiple design decisions had been made that directly contradicted software engineering best practices. Most seriously, several security vulnerabilities had been introduced that could potentially expose client data. But the most damaging finding was the discovery of what I called ghost code. Algorithms and functions that had been copied from other sources without proper attribution or understanding. Some of this code had been taken from open-source projects without proper licensing. Other pieces had been copied from competitors' products, creating potential intellectual property violations. When I presented my findings to Marcus, his reaction was even stronger than I had expected. "Are you telling me that Small Biz Suite contains stolen code?" he asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm telling you that it contains code that appears to have been copied from external sources without proper documentation or attribution," I replied carefully. "Some of these sources have licensing requirements that we may not be meeting." Marcus stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the city skyline. What's the potential liability? If the original copyright holders become aware of the violations, we could face lawsuits, licensing fees, and potentially be forced to rewrite significant portions of the codebase. And the security vulnerabilities? They need to be addressed immediately. If they're exploited, we could face regulatory sanctions, client lawsuits, and massive damage to our reputation. Marcus turned back to me, his expression grave. What do you recommend? This was the moment I'd been building toward for over a year. I pulled out another folder, this one containing detailed specifications for Small Biz Suite 2.0. I recommend a complete architectural rebuild, I said. I've developed a new platform that addresses all the issues I've identified, implements proper security protocols, and uses only properly licensed code. The new version would be significantly more robust, secure, and scalable than the current implementation. Marcus examined the specifications with growing amazement. How long have you been working on this? I've been developing it in my spare time for the past 8 months, sir. I wanted to be prepared with solutions, not just problems. This is incredible work. Alexandra, the technical architecture is far more sophisticated than our current implementation. He looked up at me with a new level of respect. I have to ask, why didn't you bring this to me sooner? I wanted to make sure it was completely ready, sir. And I wanted to fully understand the scope of the problems with the current implementation before proposing such a comprehensive solution. Marcus spent the next hour going through the technical specifications, asking detailed questions about the architecture, the security implementations, and the projected development timeline. His questions were sophisticated and probing, and I could see him gradually realizing the true scope of what I had accomplished. Alexandra, I need to ask you something directly, he said finally. Did you develop the original concept for Small Biz Suite? I had been waiting for this question for over a year. I pulled out my final folder, the one containing all my original development documentation, time-stamped files, market research receipts, and the detailed timeline proving my ownership of the project's core concepts. Yes, sir, I did. For the next 2 hours, I walked Marcus through the complete history of the project. I showed him my original research, my prototype development, my market analysis, and the detailed technical specifications I had prepared for the original presentation. I played recordings of conversations where David had acknowledged my ownership of the ideas before deciding to steal them. Marcus's face grew increasingly dark as he absorbed the evidence. Why didn't you bring this to me immediately when David announced the project as his own? I tried, sir. But David controlled access to you during the development phase, and by the time the project launched, I was told that making such accusations could be grounds for termination. Who told you that? David did, sir. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing the implications. Finally, he looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of anger, admiration, and something that might have been fear. Alexandra, what you've uncovered represents a massive failure of leadership on multiple levels. The intellectual property theft, the architectural flaws, the security vulnerabilities, the potential legal liabilities. Any one of these issues could have seriously damaged the company. Together, they represent a crisis that could have destroyed us. Yes, sir. And you've spent the past year not only identifying these problems, but developing comprehensive solutions, all while being excluded from recognition for your original work. Yes, sir. Marcus stood up and walked around his desk, extending his hand to me. I owe you an apology, Alexandra, and the company owes you far more than that. What happened next unfolded with the swift precision of a corporate restructuring. Marcus called an emergency board meeting for the following morning, where I presented my complete findings to the full board of directors. The reaction was immediate and decisive. David Harrison was terminated that afternoon. The official reason given was performance issues and strategic misalignment, but the board was privately briefed on the full scope of his misconduct. He was escorted from the building within hours, his stock options were revoked, and he was required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prevented him from discussing his departure or the circumstances surrounding it. I was immediately promoted to Vice President of Product Development, with a salary increase of 60%, stock options worth potentially millions of dollars, and a team of 25 developers to implement Small Biz Suite 2.0. But the most satisfying moment came 3 days later. When I received a call from David, he had apparently been trying to understand what had happened and had gradually pieced together that I was behind his downfall. "Alexandra," he said, his voice tight with anger and desperation. "We need to talk." "I don't think we have anything to discuss. David, you destroyed my career. You know that, right? I'll never work in this industry again." "You destroyed your own career," I replied calmly. "I just documented it. I made Small Biz Suite successful. I generated millions of dollars in revenue for the company. You implemented my project. David, you took credit for my work, and you did it badly. The original architecture was fundamentally flawed, and you created massive legal and security liabilities that could have destroyed the company." "That's not true. It's all documented. David, every conversation, every decision, every line of code, the board has seen all of it." There was a long silence on the line. When David spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything from you, David. I already have everything I need." "There has to be some way to fix this." "There is," I said. "You can learn from this experience. You can develop actual skills instead of stealing other people's work. You can build something of your own. And if I don't, then you'll continue to fail, because you'll be competing against people like me who actually know what they're doing." I hung up the phone and returned to work on Small Biz Suite 2.0. 3 months later, we launched the new platform to universal acclaim. It was faster, more secure, and more feature-rich than any competing product in the market. Within 6 months, it had generated over $15 million in new revenue and had been licensed by 3 major corporations for their internal use. The industry recognition that followed was everything I'd dreamed of during those dark months when David was receiving credit for my work. I was featured on the cover of Tech Innovation Quarterly, keynoted the National Small Business Software Summit, and was invited to join the advisory board of the Software Engineering Institute. But the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. 6 months after David's termination, I received a LinkedIn message from one of the developers who had worked on the original Small Biz Suite project. "Alexandra." The message read, "I wanted to reach out and apologize. Several of us on the development team knew that David didn't understand the technical architecture of the project. We could see him struggling with concepts that you seemed to grasp intuitively. We suspected that the original ideas weren't his, but we were afraid to speak up. Watching you turn the situation around and prove what really happened was inspiring. You showed us what real leadership looks like." As I write this, it's been 2 years since David's termination. Small Biz Suite 2.0 has become the industry standard for small business software integration, generating over $50 million in revenue and establishing Meridian as the undisputed leader in our market segment. I now lead a product development organization of over 60 people, and I'm working on technologies that could revolutionize how small businesses operate. David, meanwhile, has struggled to find employment in the tech industry. His reputation has been quietly destroyed by the network of contacts who became aware of his misconduct. He eventually found work at a small consulting firm, but at a fraction of his former salary and with no opportunity for advancement. I occasionally wonder if I should feel guilty about the completeness of his professional destruction. But then I remember the months of watching him receive recognition for my work, the arrogance with which he dismissed my concerns, and the fundamental injustice of a system that rewards theft over innovation. The lesson I learned from this experience is that sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate retaliation. It's patient, methodical preparation for the moment when truth and justice align. David thought he had won when he stole my project, but he had actually set in motion his own downfall. By taking credit for work he didn't understand, he had positioned himself to fail when that understanding became crucial. In the end, I didn't just get my revenge, I got my career back, my recognition, and the satisfaction of knowing that my work was being properly valued and attributed. David may have stolen my idea and made $5 million, but I took it back, made it better, and built a $50 million business around it. And the best part? I did it all completely legally, ethically, and professionally. Sometimes, the most devastating revenge is simply being better at your job than the person who tried to steal your success. The corporate world is full of David Harrisons, people who rise through theft, manipulation, and taking credit for others' work. But it's also full of people like me, who are willing to work harder, think deeper, and wait longer for justice to prevail. In my office now, I keep a framed copy of that first Tech Innovation Quarterly cover, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that innovation belongs to the innovators, that talent will ultimately triumph over theft, and that sometimes, the best way to defeat someone who has wronged you is simply to be so good at what you do that their mediocrity becomes impossible to hide. David Harrison thought he could steal my future. Instead, he gave me the motivation to build something even better than I had originally imagined. And that, I think, is the sweetest revenge of all.